Good morning, Senator.
from CBB.
From CDB.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
George.
George.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Nice to meet you, Senator.
Good, good, man. My absolute pleasure.
Yeah, same here,
All
same
right.
here. Okay.
Grace and Samantha, good morning. How are you?
Hey, what's up? Huh? Long time? It's a structural thing.
Where you're on the scale when
What?
just a kind of lovers.
Oh boy! A big joke that man.
So good morning, everyone. Good morning to our online viewers. We have a few delegates nearby, so just give us a few more minutes to allow them to arrive. Thank you so much for your patience.
Morning. Hi, morning. I need some backup assistance. I need to get this computer to shut down now so that I can boot it up, reboot it up, and get this song in my speech program up because I don't hear it. Restart machine. That's what you want, right? Yeah. Half an hour because shut it, turn off the also the noise box. Shut it off. Like shut it off. Okay. Good now. Yeah, I'm good. Good now. Okay, all right.
Unless they get stuck in traffic.
Hi, how are you doing? Last time I did again, leave again Saturday. person dealing with it. You are the person dealing with it, the thing for January. Yeah, man, I can't deal with that today, my dear. But I'm busy at work. All right. But I can't with that day. I'm in a session.
No, 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 come on. So the blue, red light.
That's what comes back to us. Just came back from overseas.
Maybe could I use a what do you think is juggling? Alright.
as well?
Yes.
Blessings, man.
Blessings.
Blessings.
Morning. Morning. Where's the most
All right, so good morning again, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. Allow me to welcome you to this Disability Assessment Validation and Sensitization Workshop, where we will discuss the findings of the disability assessment study that was commissioned by the Caribbean Development Bank in 2020. With that said, I want you to get ready for some insightful discussions, enlightened perspectives, and a collective exploration of how we can further contribute to a world where everyone is seen, heard, and valued. I am Daisy Leslie, Senior Research Fellow of the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies here at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, and it is my distinct pleasure to guide you through today's proceedings. We'll kickstart today's proceedings with 4 opening remarks, but before we do that, please allow me to specially acknowledge a number of individuals. Dr. Martin Baptiste, Division Chief, Social Sector Division, Caribbean Development Bank. Professor Audrey Henry Lee, Project Lead and Pro-Vice Chancellor for Graduate Studies and Research, the University of the West Indies. Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, CARICOM Special Rapporteur on Disabilities, Opposition Senator in the Parliament of Jamaica, and Director of the UWI Center for Disabilities. We also have Mrs. Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Jamaica. Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. We also have joining us Mrs. Kimberly Marriott Blake, Executive Director, Jamaica Association for the Deaf. Mr. Conrad Harris, Executive Director at Jamaica Society for the Blind. Mr. Andre Witter, Chief Executive Director, Ready to Sign. We also want to thank you for taking the time to join us today and to, agree to enrich today's discussion. We want to also welcome our online participants. And we hope that you're able to stay with us over the duration of the workshop. We understand that for those persons still wishing to join, we're streaming live from the JCPD website. So with that said, I will now invite Professor Audrey Henry Lee, Project Lead, and Pro Vice Chancellor to provide her opening remarks.
Dr. Martin Batiste, Division Chief, Social Sector Division, Caribbean Development Bank, Mrs. Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director, Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, CARICOM Special Rapporteur on Disabilities and Director for Center for Disability Studies, the UWI, Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, Dr. Dacia Leslie, Senior Research Fellow, the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies, the University of the West Indies, ladies and gentlemen, online and in person, good day and welcome. Welcome to the workshop designed to disseminate the findings from the Jamaica Disability Assessment. We thank our host, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. We express our profound gratitude to the Caribbean Development Bank for funding this important study. Let us give CDB a resounding round of applause. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, the research involved the conduct of socio-economic disability assessments in 4 borrowing member countries: Grenada, St. Lucia, Jamaica, and the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The main output of these studies is the identification of strategic priority areas for program and project interventions in support of the sustainable development of persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities were integral to the study, and we are proud to say that at every step of the way, we sought their guidance and their direction. We are indebted to Senator Floyd Morris, one of the main investigators whose interventions enhanced the research. We thank all the members of the research team who have worked hard. Thank you to Professor Maureen Sams-Vaughan, who is the principal investigator of the Jamaica study that we'll hear about today. Unfortunately, she's not with us, but her presentation will be made by Senator Morris. As you will hear from the study, ladies and gentlemen, Jamaica has made several commitments to persons with disabilities. We have ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The Disability Act came into effect on February 14, 2022, following its approval in 2014 and the affirmation of disability regulations in 2021. Yet, there is much to be done. Persons with disabilities are at risk of being left behind in the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals. As we strive to fulfill a vision of Jamaica, the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business, we must ensure that we achieve inclusive development and everyone is able to participate fully and effectively in the development of our society. Reviewing the 4 CDB country disabilities assessment, there are several common themes coming from the Caribbean region. I will just focus on a few. We will focus on the Jamaican study afterwards with Dr. Floyd Morris, but I just want to show you that throughout the Caribbean, there are some common themes that are emerging from the 4 country disabilities assessment. 1, so there are several calls for action, and 1, inclusive education with the appropriate accommodations, assistive technologies, and support services to ensure that all persons with disabilities can fulfill their full potential. 2, disability responsive healthcare that provides preventive, curative, and rehabilitative services without discrimination. 3, accessible infrastructure that ensures that public spaces, transportation, and information tech networks are inclusive for persons with diverse disabilities. inclusivity of disabilities should be mainstreamed in rural planning. 4, inclusive labor markets with anti-discrimination policies to create a workplace that reflects diversity. 5, independent living and community inclusion that provides community engagement programs, recreational activities, and accessible public spaces. 6, acceptance and respect. Perhaps what is most important to persons with disabilities is for others to focus on their abilities and strengths and not their disabilities. They do not want pity, they want acceptance and dignified social protection. They want us to dismantle the barriers that hinder their progress and build a society where inclusion is the rule rather than the exception. I will stop here. There is an upcoming regional workshop where I will present many more of the common findings, but I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what is happening in the Caribbean region. So today we'll focus on the Jamaican study, which will be presented by Senator Morris. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to speak on behalf of the UWI too. And we at the UWI are very pleased to be involved with a research project that is so impactful and provides evidence-based policy recommendations for the Caribbean region. This research helps us to assist in the positive transformation of the Caribbean and the wider world. This is part of our mission, and we are very much engaged in the positive transformation of our people. We have approved a UWI disability policy, and we have established a Center for Disability Studies, and we have the director right here with us, Dr. Senator Morris. The UWI disabilities policy states that we are committed to promoting access to education and employment for persons with disabilities while maintaining academic and professional standards. We encourage applicants and currently registered students to disclose their disabilities so that we can support them as much as we can. And you may contact Dr. Floyd Morris, the head of the Center for Disability Studies. So thank you for joining us this morning. Please engage with the process. We are especially pleased that persons with disabilities are in attendance. Let's give them a round of applause. I know it's difficult to get to us this morning, but thank you so much for joining us. And we want you to be there because we cannot discuss anything about you without you. I look forward to hearing the short-term, medium-term, and long-term recommendations that we will discuss today. I know that our friends at the Caribbean Development Bank cannot wait to implement the policy recommendations that you will give us this morning. So all the very best for a productive workshop. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Professor Audrey Henry Lee, Pro Vice Chancellor for Graduate Studies and Research here at the UWI. We're now going to invite Dr. Martin Baptiste, Division Chief, Social Sector Division, Caribbean Development Bank. Put your hands together and make him feel welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Mrs. Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director, Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, CARICOM Special Rapporteur on Disabilities, Opposition Senator in the Parliament of Jamaica, and Director of the UWI Center for Disability Studies. Professor Henry Lee, Project Lead and Pro Vice Chancellor, University of the West Indies. Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Mrs. Kimberly Marriott Blake, Executive Director, Jamaica Association for the Deaf. Mr. Conrad Harris, Executive Director at Jamaica Society for the Blind. Mr. Andre Witter, Chief Executive Director, ready to sign. Distinguished colleagues and delegates and special welcome to our friends and persons with disabilities. On behalf of the President and staff of the Caribbean Development Bank, we are quite pleased to be invited to participate in this third National Disability Assessment Workshop here in Jamaica. I know that we were supposed to have had this workshop a few weeks ago, and I don't know who commissioned an earthquake so that we can have it this time instead, but I know that we're all glad to be here. Friends, the Caribbean Development Bank has demonstrated our ongoing commitment and investment opportunities in the Caribbean region's growing communities of persons with disabilities. And this is why CDB has identified the need and mobilized resources to enhance the policy and technical capacity of 4 of our borrowing member countries, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, and of course, Jamaica. The conduct of this disabilities assessment and policy dialogue is designed to help our countries design, implement, monitor, and evaluate evidence-based programs that mainstream disability and inclusion through the availability of quantitative and qualitative data on disability. We dare not plan or program without having first measured and having done the assessments. Through these assessments, strategic priority areas have emerged to provide countries with a suite of urgent areas of action to improve the lives and livelihood of persons with disabilities. Whether those are related to changes in regulations and standards, expanding access to high-quality education, health, and social services, increasing employment opportunities for persons with disabilities, and promoting entrepreneurship, including persons with disabilities in policy-making and decision-making organs of governance. The time has long gone to show meaningful engagement and empowerment with persons with disabilities. Indeed, this will assist our countries to continue what in the case of Jamaica is a 43-year journey of having signed conventions, whether the international conventions on the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination in 1966, to the conventions on the rights of persons with disabilities in 2007, moving beyond just signing conventions as Jamaica has done to accelerate concretizing those conventions in legislation, in learning, in labor, in leisure, and in life. Friends, CDB continues to serve as the catalytic development partner for disability mainstreaming. And so throughout in the bank, we have mainstreamed several projects addressing disability and development imperatives in education, agriculture, infrastructure, the whole gamut of development work that we do across the region. 2 of those come to mind. We are now in the final stages of developing a model special needs education, inclusive education policy and strategy for the region. In fact, right now, our team is meeting with our consultants here in Jamaica to finalize the policy this week for adoption and implementation. This policy and strategy will provide a blueprint to democratize access, treatment, and learning experiences in the classroom so that every person, regardless of their own unique and exceptional circumstances, can be treated equally and experience success in learning. For us, access to quality learning must not be restricted to the confines of basic education, but persons with disabilities must have the full course of learning to tertiary education so that they are able to realize their fullest potential and contribute meaningfully to the development of their communities and our countries. Second, we are mainstreaming disability inclusion in projects and programs as we work across the region, including infrastructure projects, so that our built environment is configured for inclusive access to persons with disabilities. This, we understand, is not a favor, but a right. The right to access, the right to dignity, the right to services, the right to contribute to development, the right to live fulfilled lives. CDB looks forward to the results of the meaningful engagement that you would have here over the next 2 days, and the work that would result from those consultations as we engage with public institutions, the private sector, and civil society. The continued mainstreaming of disability into the bank's work throughout the region is imperative to strengthen the fulsome participation of persons with disabilities in the society, economy, and the decision-making processes in keeping with the SDGs. This project, we know, has provided governments, including the government of Jamaica and CDB, with an opportunity to develop more targeted evidence-based projects to support disability mainstreaming. We'd like to thank the UWI team of consultants, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, and of course the government of Jamaica, the Ministry of Social Security and Labor, and the Planning Institute of Jamaica for its commitment to this invaluable work. We all agree that we dare not leave the welfare and well-being of persons with disabilities to the tender mercies of those with favor, but it must be to the intentional investment in the sensibilities, systems, and services that place them at the center of our work together. At CDB, we will continue to work closely with all of our partners to ensure that the full potential needs of persons with disabilities is harnessed in the spirit of your motto, nothing about us without us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin Baptiste, Division Chief, Social Sector Division, Caribbean Development Bank. I would like to also use this opportunity to thank the Caribbean Development Bank for their continued support and for the evidence-based work they continue to pursue towards inclusive sustainable development. At this time, I'm going to invite Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Dr. Hendricks.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Martin Baptiste, Division Chief, Social Sector Division, Caribbean Development Bank. Mrs. Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director, Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, CARICOM Special Rapporteur on Disabilities and Director of the UWI Center for Persons with the University Center for Disability Studies. Professor Henry Lee, Project Lead and Pro-Vice Chancellor, University of the West Indies. Specially invited guests or Board of Directors, agency heads, persons with disabilities, students, all, media, good morning again. It is an honor to address this distinguished gathering this morning as we come together in the observation of Disabilities Awareness Week 2023, and to bring to your attention the significant findings from this recent study that has shed light on the situation of persons with disabilities in Jamaica. This study was funded by the Caribbean Development Bank and the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, and of course the research conducted by the team of the University of the West Indies, headed by Professor Henry Lee. This study utilized a mixed method approach encompassing both quantitative and qualitative research methodologies. The quantitative aspect of the assessment involved a comprehensive Household Disability Survey conducted in 2023, providing valuable statistical insights into the lives and experiences of individuals with disabilities. And we can verify that it was persons with disabilities that were targeted because the sample came from the database, the national database hosted by the JCPD, with permission, of course, by the clients themselves. Additionally, qualitative research in the form of a desk review and institutional assessment and focus group discussions, the latter involving both adults and children with disabilities, was carried out in 2021. The institutional assessment, which included elite interviews with key stakeholders, further enriched the depth of understanding regarding the challenges faced by persons with disabilities in Jamaica. So despite Jamaica being recognized as an upper middle income country by the World Bank, and the recent improvements in its economic indicators, including a decline in unemployment to 4.5% in April 2023, and a reduction in the poverty rate to 12.6% in 2022, the study's findings reveal that the experiences of persons with disabilities is not at all in tandem or in line with these realities. While indicators such as life expectancy, access to health, education, high immunization rates, and universal primary education present promising figures, the study indicates that these overall statistics do not adequately capture the status of persons with disabilities in the country. It is evident that there are specific challenges and barriers faced by individuals with disabilities that are not sufficiently reflected in the broader national indicators. Therefore, it is crucial that we address these disparities and work towards creating a more inclusive and supportive environment for persons with disabilities in Jamaica. I believe the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities and the Ministry of Labor by extension are well positioned to utilize these findings to advocate for the rights of persons, the rights and well-being of individuals with disabilities. By leveraging this valuable insight, we can collaboratively develop targeted initiatives and policies to ensure the full inclusion and empowerment of persons with disabilities in the country's development trajectory. I look forward to discussing these matters further and exploring potential strategies to address the issues highlighted in the study. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christine Hendricks, for highlighting some of the methodological rigor that the study went through. We certainly appreciate and look forward to a strengthened partnership with the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities as these findings make their way towards being translated into tangible results, right? So thank you so very much. I'm now going to invite to the podium Mrs. Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, to give her opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Professor Henry Lee, Project Lead and Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Dr. Martin Baptiste, Division Chief, Social Sector Division for Caribbean Development Bank, Senator Floyd Morris, Researcher and Head of the Disabilities Studies Center here at the University of the West Indies, Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, members of the Board of Directors of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities here in this room and online, members of the ministries, departments, and agencies, and of course, by no means least, persons here present and those representing the community of persons with disabilities. A pleasant good morning to you all. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the Minister, Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of State, Honorable Norman Dunn, and the Permanent Secretary, Colette Roberts Risden, all of who have conveyed their apologies for absence. But they are involved in competing activities. This is Disabilities Awareness Week. And so Minister Charles will join this session tomorrow in Montego Bay. It is that important to him. He's not making it today, but he sees it fit to be present in the discussions and the engagement. The Caribbean Development Bank Disability Assessment Report for Jamaica 2023 is certainly anchored in the National Disability and Development Agenda, with that of the ambitious but attainable plan in the Global Sustainable Development Goals, that of having people at the core of their own development, and it is no different for persons with disabilities. This report then presents the opportunity for us to look at the findings and to develop concrete actions so that we may progressively realize the intent and principles of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that of leaving no one behind. The report highlights some strides that have been made over the years, but certainly highlights challenges that will advance several recommendations and good practices for implementation at the national level, the intersectoral level, and the sector-specific level. This report then presents the opportunity to create a more inclusive society in which persons with disabilities can live independently on a more equal basis with others. It is with a heightened sense of purpose that I join you today as we gather in this spirit of resilience and a demonstration that the Ministry of Labor and Social Security is committed to the cause of persons with disabilities. And we are joining you today and our partners, the Caribbean Development Bank, University of the West Indies, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, for the National Validation and Sensitization Workshop on Disability Assessment, where we can further commit to implementing the Disabilities Act. Ambitious are the plans, both in the SDGs as well as in this report, but we are resolved to be strengthened and to acknowledge the pivotal role that the ministry plays in implementing the recommendations in this report. It is therefore important that we break down the barriers faced by persons with disabilities. It is a momentous occasion and a milestone in our nation's journey towards true inclusivity, using data to build on our disability inclusion strategy and plans, not just for Jamaica and or the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, but for other ministries, departments, and agencies of government. It is therefore an opportunity for us to translate the specific recommendations into the inclusion strategy for all ministries and also the private sector and our international development partners, all critical to advancing this cause. We convene today not just as policymakers, academia, and advocates, but as critical stakeholders in a united front to acknowledge that the road to equality for persons with disabilities, in the words of the minister, is imperative and non-negotiable. What a better time to disseminate the findings of this important study and sensitize the public than in Disabilities Awareness Week. So the earthquake has other intentions. So we validate the findings of this critical study, and let us remember the quest for social justice is both urgent and important. The Ministry of Labour and Social Security extends the deepest appreciation to all those whose tireless efforts and tenacity have brought us to this important milestone. The Caribbean Development Bank, in partnership with the Government of Jamaica, has funded this study, and I assure you that the return on investment will be long-lasting and positive. I also want to thank the University of the West Indies, headed by Professor Aldre Lee, the team lead, and Senator Floyd Morris and Dr. Sams Vaughan, researchers, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, and ministry representatives for your diligence, and for every stakeholder who has lent their voice and effort to this cause. We are grateful. In this, we also want to identify the Planning Institute of Jamaica. I recall when the study commenced and was being conducted, it coincided with the onset of the COVID pandemic. And recognizing that this did not deter the team in ensuring that we have this study today. So despite the concrete actions that have been presented, this assessment is for us to validate and to implement with fervor and with urgency by, for, and with persons with disabilities. Some of the recommendations have already been in train, first of which is that the Disabilities Act should come into force. Senator, it is here. The Disabilities Act came into force in February 14, 2022. We also have the Disabilities Rights Tribunal that was also implemented. Other recommendations, such as the review of our social protection programs to include persons with disabilities more intentionally and targeted, are being reviewed even now at the ministry. We note the public awareness is critical, and it is important in sensitizing the public to advance all efforts in ensuring that persons with disabilities are respected. We also note, as an activity in this week, Disabilities Awareness Week, collaboration with the Ministry of Justice, a legal aid expo in ensuring that persons with disabilities have rights, persons with disabilities have information in terms of how they can be assisted through the law. We are also coordinating with UNICEF in enhancing the database of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, and that will be a game changer in ensuring that persons with disabilities can access the programs easier, and their well-being and welfare can be assisted greatly. So the work we embark on today is not saying that we have not started. We are continuing the journey, and we will ensure that the recommendations are not just looking at policy making, but reaffirming our commitment that every citizen, regardless of ability, is integral to the fabric of our society. So let this workshop be a testament of the ministry's unyielding dedication and commitment in forging with Jamaica a robust, equitable, and unwavering approach in its pursuit of social equity. With the enriching insights that we gather and the strategies that we will formulate as we discuss today, we hope that we will pave the way for not only recovery, but for a renewal of our social contract with the community of persons with disabilities. We are here to ensure that the recommendations we validate today are not momentary or short-lived, but are momentous and monumental in enriching our policies and our programs to resonate and improve the lives of persons with disabilities across communities and for generations to come. So with this, we want to ensure that the pillars of the United Nations, development, human rights, peace and security, and we'll add with Jamaica's complementing prosperity and productivity, will be for all Jamaicans, especially persons with disabilities. So the ministry not only takes note with appreciation the resources, time, and effort put in this report, but we will be resolute in adopting the recommendations which have been divided into high, medium, and low priority, so that we can promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities through social inclusion. Noting that accessibility is critical in all spheres of life, in transportation, in health, in education, in political life, and in recreation, in all spheres of life for persons with disabilities. And so we will continue to work to advance the rights of persons with disabilities in the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of not only the Sustainable Development Goals, but the Disabilities Act. We thank the JCPD for the efforts that they have been advancing so far. We know we have much more work to do, but together we can make it, and we will, through greater determination and hope and advocacy, ensure that persons with disabilities are respected and their dignity are upheld. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Dion Jennings. And thank you for making reference to monitoring and evaluation. Any reference to that, puts me at the edge of my seat, and I get really excited as a coordinator of M&E here at the University of the West Indies. So we also recognize the instrumental role that the Ministry of Labor and Social Security plays in narrowing the implementation gap, and for that we thank you, Mrs. Jennings, for leading that charge. So I'm just going to invite you to put your hands together for all four speakers. Awesome, thank you so very much. Now we will hear from Senator Dr. Floyd Morris. He will be presenting the main findings from the study, and he will also highlight a way forward for supporting the social inclusion of persons with disabilities. Just a reminder for those persons just joining us, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris is CARICOM Special Rapporteur on Disabilities, and he's also the director of the UWI Center for Disabilities. Senator Morris, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my friend and colleague, Dr. Daisy Leslie, Professor Audrey Henry Lee, Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies and Project Lead, Dr. Martin Baptiste of the Caribbean Development Bank, Mrs. Dion Jennings of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Dr. Christine Hendricks of the brand new Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, attendees to the seminars, persons with disabilities, members of the media fraternity, a pleasant good morning to you all. I am very happy to be here this morning, especially when I am in civilized weather conditions and not in an environment where I was yesterday of below 0 degrees in London, albeit on a worthy cause, because I was invited by the Commonwealth Secretariat, partnering with the Center for Disability Studies and the Commonwealth Disability Forum to drive the disability agenda in the Commonwealth. And you're going to be hearing some very exciting things coming out of that over the next couple of months. But it was very important to be there, although I don't like the cold weather at all. And I must say as well, this is Disability Awareness Week. And I say to my brothers and sisters with disabilities in Jamaica and across the Caribbean, happy Disability Awareness Week, and the day which was celebrated and observed on Sunday under the theme, United in Action to Rescue and Achieve the SDGs for, with, and by persons with disabilities. And you see a lot of emphasis being placed on the disability agenda now. It is a human rights issue. And as I speak about human rights, next week is Human Rights Day, and the UN will be observing 75 years of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And again, Prof, I have to leave the island on Saturday to go into the freezer box in Switzerland to participate in UN activities, because they are publishing a book on 75 years of human rights, and I'm privileged to be one of 17 individuals to have a chapter in that book. And so it's a lot of work that's being done. And I don't want anyone to underestimate the research that has been done by the team led by Professor Audrey Henry Lee here at the University of the West Indies, where this disability assessment of the 4 countries within the Caribbean is concerned, and this research sponsored by the CDB. And I want to say to the CDB, maximum respect due. Because very few entities are stepping up to the plate in terms of pushing the disability agenda, notwithstanding the fact that it features in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities for multilateral institutions and bilateral institutions to give support under Article 32 of the Convention. And we don't have enough research coming out of the Caribbean in terms of the disability agenda. and there is there's a serious vacuum in terms of research on this community in the Caribbean. And so today we are gathered here to hear and review the findings of the UWI CDB Disability Assessment Report for Jamaica. And I must say that the project lead for Jamaica, Professor Sams Vaughan, prepared a report, and I'm here standing in her stead. So bear with me as I make the presentation. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was adopted on 13th December 2006 by the United Nations. It was opened for signature on 30th March 2007, and 82 signatories were affixed to the CRPD on that date. It's the highest number of signatories in history on an opening day. It is the first comprehensive human rights treaty of the 21st century. The convention was entered into force on the 3rd of May 2008. Caribbean governments primarily signed and later ratified the CRPD. And I must say that once they have signed and ratified the treaty, they are obligated to honoring the treaty under the Convention of Treaties at the United Nations. Jamaica was the first country in the world to sign and ratify the CRPD, both on the 30th of March 2007, and if you look at the document, you will see a signature that looks like mine. The Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, aims to support the attainment of the rights of persons with disabilities through the following: identification of evidence-based, country-specific strategic priority areas, identification of evidence-based Caribbean region strategic priority areas. Disability assessments were conducted in 4 Caribbean countries, commenced in 2021, right in the midst of the pandemic. And these are Grenada, Jamaica, St. Lucia, and Trinidad and Tobago. The results from the disability assessment in Jamaica are being shared today. And in conducting the assessment, the research, we adopted a mixed methods approach, and these were triangulated against established peer-reviewed research and articles that were published in different journals and books. Literature review of international treaties and national disability legislation, policy, programs and projects, We did elite interviews, institutional assessments, focus group discussion with persons with disabilities and caregivers. In terms of quantitative methods, we did an analysis of government expenditure for persons with disabilities, structured interviews with persons with disabilities or their caregivers, convenient sample identified from organizations serving persons with disabilities, a sample size of 300, with all parishes in Jamaica represented. Review of international treaties, legislation, etc. We looked at the national policy framework 2015 to 2021. We take note that 157 pieces of legislation were tabled in Parliament, with 55% dealing with amendments to legislation. We look at the National Policy Registry, 60 national policies, numerous ministry-level policies, selected policy, selected process of analysis of legislation and policy utilized, any policy, legislation specific to disability. And in this regard, we look at the Disabilities Act, the Education Act, the Special Education Policy, Early Childhood and Regulations, Child Protection and Parenting Supporting Legislation. And in this regard, the Child Care and Protection Act was very important. The National Parenting Support Act. We looked at the employment legislation, Employment Act and legislation, legislation affecting access, and that was where the Building Act came into review. National Development Plans, Vision 2030. And then we look at evaluation systems for national laws and policies. Legislation and policy review findings. 7 laws and 8 national policies were reviewed. Laws and policies focused on disabilities had the highest scores. Laws and policies prior to passage of Disabilities Act had lower scores, and I guess a part of the reason for that is because it never took into consideration the definitions of persons with disabilities. Laws and policies that included persons with disabilities in process had higher scores. Some notable gaps: definition of disability, There were problems with definition of disability, limited data, but more limited for persons with disabilities, limited resource allocation, but more limited resources for persons with disabilities, limited gender sensitivity, limited implementation, monitoring, and evaluation mechanism, Dr. Leslie speaking it into being. Elite interviews and institutional assessments. Structured, we looked at some, we conducted utilized a structured questionnaire, inquiring of the following: personal and institutional understanding of key terms, such as disability, inclusion, CRPD, SDGs, policy and organizational practice, inclusion, access, persons with disabilities as staff, institutional advocacy practices, policy or advocacy work for persons with disabilities, institutional program and service practices, inclusive programs, participation of men and women with disabilities, data collection on persons with disabilities, data disaggregation by gender, age, disability, organization resourcing for disability inclusion, allocated for access, participation of persons with disabilities, and we looked at coordination with other disability agencies. And so we look now at the elite institutional assessment findings. There, we detected from the elite interviews assessment that there are limited public knowledge on disability, CRPD, and SDGs relative to persons with disabilities. No organizational policy on persons with disabilities are available, and the delayed implementation of the Disability Act has hindered the advancement of policy development in workplaces. Now that the Disabilities Act is in place, we're hoping that that would be changed. Access and inclusion in the workforce. There are challenges there. Persons with disabilities are not adequately represented in the workforce. When they are, the jobs are typically the clerical and administrative categories, and they are not in the professional and technical areas. There is limited data collection disaggregated by disability. When data is collected, there is questionable validity due to unclear definitions of disability. There is limited budgetary allocation to facilitate accommodations for persons with disabilities. there is inadequate coordination of services for persons with disabilities. Organizations focus on persons with disabilities were those who primarily had appropriate services for persons with disabilities. And then so that was it in terms of the findings for the elite interviews. And I look now at the focus group discussions. There were 8 focus group discussions, and this involved 79 participants, and these included adults drawn from urban and rural areas, persons with disabilities and their caregivers were included. Focus group, and we start with the first focus group, which looked at participation in family life and family interaction. And the main finding here is that participants reported variability in inclusion in family activities and family support, participation in community activities, and here we detected that there was variable inclusion in community activities and participation in political processes, conducting day-to-day activities. There was limited access and ability to participate by persons with disabilities. When we look at physical, mental, and sexual reproductive health, accessing physical health services and treatment was adequate. Cost of investigation, medication, therapeutic services. These were challenging for persons with disabilities. Accessing mental, sexual, and reproductive health was challenging, and these individuals reported facing discrimination. And access to assistive aids very limited. And then we look at another group of the focus group discussion results, looking at education and school to work transition. Most persons with disabilities in the focus group had access to education up to the secondary level. And there were financial constraints which precluded higher education. Access of school to work transition support existed. And we look at now labor force participation, employment, and unemployment. And in the focus group discussion here, persons with disabilities reported that there were more opportunities now for persons with disabilities. I guess with the advent of modern technology, we are seeing that here, but in terms of general employment, it was being stymied by stigma and discrimination in employment and workplaces. And there's report of limited access to business development services. We turn to another focus group, set of focus group discussions, looking at housing and utilities. Participants reported the need for designating housing for persons with disabilities. That was the main finding there. We look at transportation and mobility. And here we see where persons with disabilities highlighted that transportation and mobility were major concerns for them. Absence of transportation impaired a variety of services for persons with disabilities and created dependence. And they also indicated that in the access to transportation, they are required to pay more in the public transportation. That is a recurrent problem right across the country, especially amongst rural folks with disabilities, since most of the public transportation in rural areas is not provided by the state. And we look now again at another group on the subject of social protection. And here, persons with disabilities have reported that social protection for persons with disabilities extremely limited. And they say that the tax and the income tax exemption and educational grants were extremely welcome. And they say there are limited available information on the services provided by the JCPD and PATH. And according to them, the PATH program required dire circumstances. I guess they mean that persons with disabilities, you have to be amongst the poorest of the poor in order to gain access. Here they are pointing that household level assessment not useful for persons with disabilities. And now we want to, so that is it in terms of the focus group discussion for persons with disabilities. I want to look at quickly at the survey of persons with disabilities and caregivers. And in terms of demographics, we did a convenient sample of persons with disabilities and their caregivers, identify from organizations providing services with disabilities. The sample size equal to 177, and whilst to some individuals it might be seen as small, but it is fairly representative in terms of the rural urban dynamics, and 63% of them were persons directly with disabilities, and the remainder were individuals, caregivers, and family members of individuals with a disability. Had 57% males, 43% females, 2/3 of the sample constituted adults, and 1/3 were children. All the parishes were represented in the survey. Of adults, 68% were single or never married. Of adults, 50% had no children. So we will look now at the direct findings. Disability epidemiology. 90% diagnosed by health professionals, and the causes of disability were congenital, 58%, illness, 22.1%, accidents and injuries, 8.5%, violence, 3.5%, other, 7%, and this including demonic causes and incorrect medication. Disability prevalence by age groups. Socio-economic status, internet use, I'm not seeing the finding here. See that on the slide. Sorry about that. So I was just checking to see if we were seeing it on the slides, but I understand that it's not there either. So we'll look at the survey findings for health and rehabilitation, mental health, one third of child population and half of adult population reported monthly anxiety, nervousness, or worry. In terms of assistive aids, used by 41% of 41.5% of population. Some of these individuals used multiple aids. Most frequently used assistive aids were mobility aids by a third. Visual aids commonly came next, used by 12%. 44.5% of assistive aids being used by persons with disabilities were reported in bad condition. Technological aids were primarily in good condition. Survey findings for education: almost 90% of persons with disabilities had attended school. Lowest attendance at preschool, 60%. Reasons for not attending school: impairment or health condition, transportation and distance, lack of assistive devices, lack of support for personal care needs, denial of enrollment by administrators, inaccessible school buildings, absence of teachers who can support children with different types of disabilities. And we'll look now at labor force participation. Of the adult population, 70% had work for pay at some point in time. Only 20% were in employment during the week prior to the data being collected. Those who were in employment earned typically less than the minimum wage, and this is a problem that we see right across the world in terms of institutional mechanisms that employ persons with disabilities. Awareness of laws, policies, and services. And this is showing that of the respondents, 12.3% are aware of the laws of relating to persons with disabilities. National policy for persons with disabilities, 6.1%. Organization for persons with disabilities, 50%. Active members of persons with disabilities, 26%. Other information gathered from the analysis: absence of accurate prevalence data on disability, limited public expenditure for persons with disabilities, difficulty accessing public information on public expenditure for persons with disabilities, public expenditure review needed, inadequate monitoring and evaluation systems. Dr. Leslie. And so we want to now turn to some recommendations based on what's presented in the report. Development of a comprehensive public education program on the Disability Act and additional laws and policies. Comprehensive evaluation of the legislative and policy and programmatic framework against the tenets of the Disabilities Act and the CRPD. Strategic review of the JCPD. Development of an ICT hub and services for persons with disabilities. Review of the social protection systems for persons with disabilities. Development of a plan for systems approach to address the barriers in the education and health sectors. Development development and implementation of a study to accurately determine the prevalence and epidemiology of persons with disabilities. Development of a coordinated and programmatic monitoring and evaluation system. Very much. Was well needed. Development, I just repeat, development of a coordinated and programmatic monitoring and evaluation system across ministries, departments and agencies, adequate financing to allow for development, allow for development and implementation and continuation of sustainable programs to further the rights of persons with disabilities are met and the strategic objectives identified in this report are addressed. And we end by acknowledging the CDP and their support for the research. All the participants who allow for this report to be comprehensively. The members of the Jamaica team, led by Professor Sams Vaughan, who is unavoidably absent for this session. And they say Dr. Floyd Morris, I'm present. So I want to commend all the members of the team who were involved in the research and putting together the report. And finally, this wasn't stated in the report as a recommendation, but one of the things that we have detected in the research is what I regard as conflicts and tensions that are emerging, and we see it happening all over the world as we move away from a medical model of disability to a more human rights approach to disability. And here you see as persons with disabilities exert their rights, you know, it is seen as a conflict and a tension between those who were trained or exposed to the medical approach to disability versus the rights-based approach. So any public education program that is going to be fashioned must be anchored in the human rights approach, but with the intention of, you know, sort of bringing a greater understanding of individuals in the broader society about the new paradigm in terms of the human rights approach versus the medical approach. And one place that it is prevalent is that of the healthcare system. And that is why you would see, for example, in the report, individuals talking about sexual and reproductive health rights. That is where it is most prevalent. And so we present the findings, and I make myself available for any question that you would want to ask at this time. Thank you. I hope I did justice to the report as presented by Professor Samsvon. Thank you.
All right, so thanks, Senator Dr. Morris, for presenting the findings of the study. I know that you have a lot of burning questions, both for persons online and in the room. He presented a number of findings. You know, the high unemployment rate, some of the things he spoke about was, you know, employment in only clerical areas, whereas the technical areas were, you know, persons with disabilities were excluded. He presented a number of recommendations as to the way forward. So now we have about 10 minutes for any questions and answers, questions that you may have with for Senator Morris, and he will provide you with a response. Any questions from the floor?
Name. Okay. Go ahead.
The question is, one of your recommendations I have seen, and it's of interest to me, that is the one that there should be a strategic review of JCPD. And the question is, based on one of the recommendations I have seen, is that the recommendation stated specifically as one of the many recommendations is a strategic review of JCPD. I am one of the council members, and I'm said I would like you to elucidate on that some more, Senator Morris. But I have another question to ask. But I ask the question first.
We'll take the second question, or we'll take 3 questions and then allow Senator Morris. If there's nobody else, anybody else with a question? No, you can pose your second question.
All right. The next question is in respect to evidence-based information. Out of your presentation, whether it's you or Dr. From CDP, that there is a paucity of research in the Caribbean region. So my question is, what are some of the reasons for that? And what is the significance of having more research in the Caribbean?
Okay.
So 2 questions.
All right. Two.
All response, and then we'll take your question.
Two very important questions that you have asked, Mr. McNish. And you will recall that I pointed out that the research was conducted during the heights of the COVID period. And this was prior to the Disability Act coming into effect. The Disability Act came into effect February 14, 2022. And that was when the new JCPD was brought into effect. So the recommendation for the review of the JCPD was formulated within the context of the JCPD prior to the 22 implementation of the legislation. I understand now that there is a new structure and policy and programmatic approach by the JCPD, and at some point in time that would have to be reviewed, but not right now. So there has to be some adjustment in terms of the that particular recommendation, but it was made within the context of the pre-2022 implementation of the Disabilities Act. All right? So understand that. Now, the other thing the question that you asked about data paucity in the Caribbean. One of the things that we have to realize is that if you don't have current and important research being done in the field of disability, we are going to remain in the dark ages. And if you look at those countries where there is significant research that has been built up, whether it be in the United States, in Canada, in England, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Japan, in South Africa, they are significantly ahead in the disability agenda. And in the Caribbean, we are just about emerging in terms of the disability research where persons with disabilities are concerned. The most research that has been done on the population of persons with disabilities have been done since about 2010. And, you know, Dr. Anicia Gale Geddes was on a very good trajectory where the research is concerned, and then she migrated to greener pastures. I think CDB took her away, and that altered, and then I entered upon the reference. Thankfully, I am involved, and I see my colleague Bethia Perrier from Trinidad and Tobago actively involved in the space as well. But there needs to be a lot more research in the field, and so this work that is being done here now is very critical. And I have said to my project lead, Professor Audrey Henry Lee, that this research cannot be locked away in the library of the University of the West Indies. And I'm looking forward, Professor Henry Lee, based on the quality of the research that I have seen thus far, for some major publication, whether it be journal, whether it be book, or so. But this is too important to be closeted. It must be published so that it adds more value to the work that is being done on the disability agenda in the region. So the research is very important. It is a part of the requirement of the CRPD Article 33 on data and statistics. It's also a critical part of the tracking of the SDGs. And so, you know, the more data, the more research that is collected, the better it is likely to be for persons with disabilities, so that there can be greater fashioning of programs and policies for this marginalized group.
Thank you so much, Senator. No, we'll take your question.
Yes, sir. Good morning. My name is Ovestra King. Senator Morris, I heard you mention that persons with disabilities at times work and the salary was below minimum wage. Isn't it illegal for one to work? Persons with disability are not to get paid below minimum wage. I'm just asking.
It is illegal for anybody to be working and paid below minimum wage. But one of the problems that we have detected, and it's not something unique to Jamaica, is that you have a lot of what you call sheltered workshops. And these sheltered workshops are designed to keep persons with disabilities occupied and to let them have something to do. It came out of the welfare era of the disability agenda. And now that we are in the rights-based era, we are seeing some serious problems with its manifestation. But it cannot be sustained. The latest general comment on work and employment from the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities on Article 27 requires that sheltered workshops be phased out. And it's because of this very reason that, you know, a lot of persons with disabilities are being employed in these workshops and paid below minimum wage. And it is a violation of the decent work agenda as stipulated on the various ILO treaties.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Any other question?
Hello, good afternoon. This is Gloria Goff, and I must, before I ask the question, commend all those who are involved in the research. It is really an all-inclusive, almost all-inclusive document, and it covers a wide variety of areas. And as Senator said before, and other persons have said it, we really need research on disabilities in a variety of areas. I need to read it some more to, digest it and so on. However, my question is, under education, it was mentioned that 92% of persons with disabilities had achieved secondary level education.
That's from the focus
That's
group
from
discussed.
the focus group. Mm-hmm. Okay. However, I did not detect anything that said how many persons or what percentage might have had tertiary level education. Could you respond? Was that a question or just that, could you respond on that?
Thank you so much.
Any other question on that regard?
Okay, we'll take a question here.
Hi, Senator Morris.
Yes.
My name is Damai Thomas. I attended the Abilities Foundation. I received my certificate in data entry. But the situation is, when people with disability go out for work, we face tremendous discrimination. And I heard this on TV once. We are building stronger. When you're building stronger and leaving out persons with disability, how that is building stronger?
All right, Damoy, thank you very much. All right, so I'll answer those two questions from Gloria and Damoy. And I must say that the question of education of persons with disabilities at the tertiary level featured in the report. The fact of the matter is that the number of persons with disabilities at the tertiary level is not significant. There's a limited amount of persons with disabilities attending tertiary institution. What we have detected is that as you go up the education ladder, the narrower the space becomes for persons with disabilities at the tertiary level. And it's because of a number of factors, I would guess, based on other research that I have done, looking at issues of cost, issues of accessible technology that is needed, and the issue of accessible technology featured in this report as well, because persons with disabilities have indicated limited access to modern assistive technologies. So it's limited number of persons with disabilities attending tertiary institutions. Now, Mr. Thomas, I share your pain and I share the concerns that you have expressed where persons with disabilities are concerned, because persons with disabilities are going to various training institutions like Abilities Foundation, receiving certification like what you have received, but yet still when they leave and time to get employment, then they are faced with discrimination. And that is what the Disabilities Act seeks to do, because the Disabilities Act seeks to prevent discrimination against persons with disabilities in the area of employment. And when you look at the high percentage of persons with disabilities who are unemployed versus those who are without a disability, you can see that there are clear discriminatory practices. And it is a matter that has to be addressed by a number of issues, including affirmative action for persons with disabilities, and also greater sensitization of employers when it comes on to employment of persons with disabilities. And that is why a part of the legislative and regulatory framework that has been established in the Jamaican context is the establishment of codes of practice for the employment of persons with disabilities to help guide employers and other individuals in the space as to how to treat and relate with persons with disabilities where employment is concerned. And then you're going to have the Disability Rights Tribunal, which, you know, if a person feels that he or she is being discriminated against, they can report the case to the JCPD, and then the JCPD investigates, and they have the option of referring it to alternative dispute mechanism or directly to the DRT. But, you know, it's a young piece of legislation that is going to take time, and the persons with disabilities themselves would have to test it. And but you would have to test it with some specific experiences.
Thank you so much, Senator Morris. In keeping with the participatory methodology that was used to implement this study, we're going to take at least one question from someone online. And allow me to just use the opportunity to also acknowledge members of the research team online. I think Dr. Lee Dunn is there, Dr. Bapaya Parry. You know, thank you for, you know, joining us today.
Yes.
So, any questions from our online delegates?
One person online was asking whether or not the report will be made public.
Prof. Henry Lee, okay, and the answer is in the affirmative, yes. And as I said, you know, it is such a rich body of work that it cannot be shelved. So, you know, publication is a must based on the findings. There's so many aspects of it to be published. There is the whole aspect of gender. There is the whole issue of employment, the issue of education, social protection. One of the interesting segments is the expenditure on disability, you know, because you have such a small portion of the budgets right across the Caribbean being expended for persons with disabilities. I don't think, based on what I've seen in the research thus far, anywhere where more than 1% of the budget is being spent on the issue of disability. And it touches so many issues where persons with disabilities are concerned.
All right, thank you so much, Senator. We have 2 questions from the head table, so I'll allow Mrs. Jennings to go first, and then Dr. Hendricks.
Okay.
Thank you. I note in the report that there are very good recommendations that have been outlined, and they're specifically related to ministries. I did not see any recommendations specifically relating to the private sector. And I ask this question because the government, we have seen, especially in relation to employment, is the largest employer of persons with disabilities. We would want to see some recommendations for the private sector and also for civil society group.
Yeah. And that's a very good observation and recommendation, and we'll make sure that, you know, in our fine-tuning, you know, it's reflected here in the final report. Final report.
Yes, thank you so very much.
That's why we're having this consultation, so we get feedback, and we can take all of these things on board.
Thank you. Thank you also to the research team and the CDB, of course, you know, for this study, because it does validate, you know, the anecdotal data that we have had with persons with disabilities. I don't want to say complain, but complaining, their complaints. And so this study is valuable, to the disability sector, to government, and as Mrs. Jennings indicated, to the private sector, because often we ask for the data, and here we have it. We have it in black and white to say exactly what is happening. I know it wouldn't have been the first, but it also validates other studies that have been done. And I recall one particularly done in 2018, it does validate that work as well to demonstrate that what we're saying about persons with disabilities, it is so. And, we really need to move to address the issues and the gaps that are, really glaring at us as a nation. Thank you. And, it is very interesting to note that though I would have known that internationally the situation is the same and regionally, to really see it on paper in this way, in terms of education, transportation, employment, healthcare, it's as if you could take any one of the islands and just deposit them in the other, and the situation of persons with disabilities remain the same. And so it is a call to us as not only a nation, but as a region, to really address seriously the issues of persons with disabilities. And the spend less than 1%, come on. We need to do better. Thank you so much.
Dr. Hendricks, let me tell you something. And I mean, what you're seeing in the report, based on my vantage point of being a member on the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, who have to review all of these country reports, when you look at the developing countries, what you are seeing here is a replication of what is taking place elsewhere. The only difference is that other jurisdictions have been using more database, more data-centered work in terms of their programmatic development, and this is why the question that Mr. McNish asks is so important, because we have to get up to speed with the research data so that we can help to shape and fashion public policy, because in a 21st century era, we can't be basing public policy on a hit or miss approach. It has to be data-driven.
Excellent points. Thank you so much, Senator Morris. You, ladies and gentlemen, you would have just heard the main study findings shared by Senator Dr. Morris, CARICOM Rapporteur, Special Rapporteur on Disabilities. Without further ado, I just want you to put your hands together for all the participants. Senator Morris, thank you so much for your active participation in this round. We're going to end this segment with closing remarks from Professor Audrey Henry Lee. While Prof. Henry Lee comes, I just want to acknowledge Dr. Jacqueline Huggins, another lead team member online, and Dr. Arlene Bailey, who is here with us. She was also played an instrumental part of the team that executed this study. Thank you again, Senator Dr. Morris. So we always value your effective leadership. Prof. Henry Lee?
Ladies and gentlemen, I know it's been a long morning, I want to thank you so much. And Dr. Dacia Leslie failed to tell you that she's also a researcher and the expert on monitoring and evaluation for the research team. So give her a round of applause. She did an excellent job today, and she also did an excellent job with the research team. So I want to thank all the presenters, especially Dr. Floyd Morris, coming from the below zero environment to join us here, and it really shows his commitment to the cause, because I know he must be suffering from jet lag. I want to thank those of you online. I want to thank our technical team. We have quite a lot of technicians. I haven't seen Richard. Where is he? He's gone. And our secretarial team, Miss Cornwall, thank you so much. Many of you would have heard from her. So she has been working behind the scenes to ensure that we do very well. So thank you, participants, persons with disabilities, all those who engage with the process, and the sign language interpreters. Give them a round of applause. I know one of them is freezing, so we'll try to end quickly. So the next section, I want us to take it very seriously, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to go into the session where we are going to do short-term, medium-term, and long-term, and we want to hear from you. What do we need to do immediately? What do we need to do in the next 2 years? What are the long-term things that we have to think about? CDB is waiting to implement the short-term. So please do not, all the other countries have a very long list. And, if you don't say anything, then you don't get anything. But they really are waiting for us to give them the recommendations. So we want to hear from you. We would have gone into work groups, but we can stay together and we can hear from you. So we are going to be quiet, and you are going to tell us what are the short-term recommendations that you are for persons with disabilities, what are the medium-term, and what are the long-term. But as we close, thank you everyone for being so engaging and for coming to listen to a very important topic, how we can improve the quality of life for persons with disabilities. Thank you very much.